Our next speaker is Ian Gibbins, who's an award-winning poet, video artist, as you've seen, and electronic musician. He used to work at Flinders University as a professor of neuroscience. For me, he always stood out because he used to come to our school board meetings wearing board shorts, which contrasted with most of the other members of the board. And during the algal bloom, if people follow Ian on Facebook, he's been a constant provider of fantastic information about the bloom. He understands the biology in a way that few others do, and he's always ready with factual and well thought out information. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Fran, and thank you, Kathy, for that introduction. I'll go reasonably quickly too. I've been working on all sorts of things to do with the aspects of the bloom, but I'll focus on human health issues. If we want to talk about other things like fish and that, we'll talk about that later in the question time. So, as Fran said, I've got a very diverse background. I came into this whole area sort of by mistake. I was windsurfing down in Counter Bay on that first weekend, and it was big waves, strong wind out one of the offshore reefs, and we came and think, geez, we've got silver eyes, sore throat, what was that? And the next day the surfers reported from round the corner at Waipinga. Since then I've been involved in the citizen science projects, the iNaturalist documentation of the wash-ups and things. But the main reason I got involved is I've got a really unusual background. So I originally started off in zoology, and I was going to be a marine biologist, a lot of work in marine biology. Worked with fish physiologists for 30 years, even after I was at Flinders. But I also did postdocs in molecular pharmacology and then neuroscience research and in the medical course. Because, as Fran know, the vagaries of the medical course, I ended up teaching just about everything to do with how the body works over 30 years. So when the first accounts of some of the toxins came up, just one of the Facebook groups, I sort of, what? That's there. I knew nothing about dinoflagellates and the phytoplankton, and that's where it all started. So the next slide, please. So there are two main organisms in the bloom which are known to be causing trouble. And the first one that was identified is this one, Karenia micomotoi, and that's a scanning electron microscope picture of one of these little organisms. They're tiny. They're only a fraction of a millimetre across. And they're a plant, but they eat things, like other things in the plankton. The main effect of the Karenia micomotoi is that it produces a cytotoxin, that is, it's something which kills cells. But no one knows what that chemical is. This has been studied for years and years, but no one knows what it is. It destroys cell membranes, the outer part of the cells, which keeps them intact. But in order for it to have its effect, this is very important, we'll come to this later, the cells have to be intact. There has to be an intact Karenia micomotoi cell hitting a fish gill or your eyes or your skin for it to have some effect. Once the cell breaks, it no longer has that effect. Next one, please. Recently, there's been a lot of publicity for very good reason that a second major organism in the bloom, another dinoflagellate called Karenia cristata, quite closely related to the other one. And this one produces a neurotoxin, it's called brevetoxin. Don't worry about all the technical stuff there. Basically what it does is it stimulates nerves to exhaustion. So the nerves fire like crazy and then they give up and stop. So it ends up causing paralysis. It's the most simple way it does. If you eat oysters or mussels which are full of this toxin, you get a condition called neurotoxic shellfish poisoning, which has been well studied around the world because many other types of Karenia, not found in Australia, produce brevetoxin. It's been well studied in Florida, for example, for over 40 years. Next one, please. So, that all sounds cut and dried. It's not. The message to come out of today is that it's really complicated and there's a lot of stuff unknown for all of the stuff that we do know. There's a huge amount that we don't. So, for example, there are other species of dinoflagellates in the bloom, not even particularly closely related to the Karenias. There's Carlidinium, there's Gymnodinium, and there's at least 4 or 5 other sorts in there as well. Okay, next one, please. And again, the details of the slide don't matter, other than to say that These other types of carenia, Riversol carta, Papilloniacea, Lonicalis, Practicia latin, these also produce toxins of all different sorts. Some of them are well known, well characterised, other ones are not well characterised at all. And there's probably twice as many species in the blooms as that. Critical thing is that the composition of the bloom changes in time and space. So what you see on one day is going to be different another day. What you see out at the beach here will be different the same day down in Seaford, and different again down at Waitpingo. Next one, please. So what are we talking about in terms of people? So most people get exposed to the effects of the bloom in one of two ways: either contacting the water, being in the water, swimming or surfing, or in my case, windsurfing and falling in a bit too often. But for most people, just on anecdotal reports and in social media, it's just from being at the beach and breathing the air. And you get a series of symptoms we'll talk about in a moment. The thing which is interesting is that the symptoms are pretty much the same for most people, most of the time, no matter what sort of contact you've got. So let's have a look. Next slide. So what most people report are these. You get sore, possibly bloodshot eyes, you get a sore, runny nose, you get a sore, scratchy throat with a cough associated with it. And then you may get a headache and nausea. That's what most people report. I've been keeping a tally from the windsurfing community with a couple hundred people and surfers, and just looking on social media, it's pretty much most people report most of the time. So next slide, please. So how can you get those sort of symptoms from something like Carenia micomotoi, and perhaps some of the other ones as well? Well, if there are cytotoxins in the water, they damage the epithelia. So what are the epithelia? They're the cells which line everything. So the outside of your skin's epithelia. That's a really tough, leathery sort of stuff. Doesn't get damaged by anything much, except I was gardening yesterday, ripped half the skin off on a bush. But that's, apart from that, it's waterproof. Stuff doesn't get through your skin particularly easily. But the lining of other organs, like the lining of your nose, the lining of your eyelids, lining of your throat, also epithelia, it's a very soft, almost squishy sort of thing. It's very easy to pick your nose and it will bleed. Very easy to scratch your eyes and it will bleed. Very easy to sore throat with an infection and feel a scratching hole. So epithelial damage produces inflammation, and inflammation then is experienced as pain. So next one, please. Now here's a complicated sort of drawing. Explaining this, and I'm not going to go into detail about that. This was actually what I did research on for 30 years. It was part of what our lab did. So something that all came home was, what all this research ever any use to anybody? Yes, well, this is what's going on. So what we've got there, the yellow blocks going along the middle of the slide, they're epithelial cells, greatly magnified. On the outside, where the sensory nerves, neuropeptide, cytokines are, little green, that's the outside world. The little green triangles are maybe little bits of carenia cells. And then underneath there, you've got a blood vessel with blood cells in it, and some nerves with lightning bolts zipping in and out of them, and some white blood cells in the corner there. When you have damage to the epithelium, it releases chemicals which then activate special class of sensory nerves, which then interact with the blood vessels, which then interact with the immune cells, which then interact with the blood vessels, which then interact with the nerves, which then interact with the epithelium, and it keeps looping around, giving you inflammation. You get swelling, you get mucus production, you might get reddening, and it's going to hurt. Next one. And that's basically what's underlying the sore eyes, sore nose, sore throat. And if it continues on, it may well, secondary to that inflammation, give you a headache and you feel sick. You feel crook because you've got inflammation and there's something going on. Your body's telling you, slow down, you feel crooked. Have a sleep, have a rest, don't have anything to eat for a while, have a day off work or whatever. Next one. And it lasts much longer too, that's the other important thing. You might be in contact with the water for only half an hour, you might be down the beach for an hour, the symptoms may well last for several days. That's the nature of inflammation. The other way people get exposed to what's going on from the bloom is from aerosols, breathing the air. So when the wind blows, when waves break, especially when the wind blows and there are waves breaking, you get foam on the surface of the water, the wind blows it up into the air. Sometimes you see that as sea haze, coming in from the sea. Sometimes you just can't see it, but it's there all the time. Tiny, tiny little microscopic droplets, which can contain whatever was in the water. And that can give the same sort of symptoms. Very similar to waterborne cytotoxins for most people. Next one, please. But there's another aspect that's really, really well studied, and that is brevetoxin, the neurotoxin which comes from some of the Karenia species, like Karenia cristata, can be well transported by these aerosols, and if you breathe it in, it can generate asthma-like symptoms. And this is made by certain variations of the brevetoxin. Brevetoxin comes in lots and lots of different forms. There's dozens of different sorts. One sort in particular is responsible for this response, and it's not related to the neurotoxic effect. It's working for different systems altogether compared to the neurotoxic effect. And there's good evidence from studies in America that, for example, antihistamines will help relieve the response. It doesn't always work, but it helps reduce it. And then as corticosteroids help as well, reduce the inflammation. You get a deep wheeze and a cough. Now, brevetoxin coming from blooms has been in Florida, as I said, for 40 years. There's a lot of work done on how people respond and how they do to it. And having these sort of asthmatic type of responses is actually relatively rare compared to all these other sorts of responses. Sore eyes, sore nose, sore throat. A cough coming from a scratchy throat is not the same as having a deep asthmatic and bronchoconstriction making it hard to breathe. But people do get that, I'm not denying that it happens. Next one, please. So, what's going on? It's a mystery. And we don't know. No one knows exactly what's happening to cause the bloodshot eyes, runny nose, scratchy throat. And here's the reasons why. The Karenia cells break up in the foam. The wave action, the wind action that makes the aerosols breaks the Karenia cells. They're incredibly fragile. You don't have something in the water and shake it up and they'll all break up and fall apart. And the Karenia cells, like Karenia micromotii, are only cytotoxic when they're intact. Once they break up, they lose this ability to cause inflammatory sort of reactions just by contact. So these symptoms are not due to contact with Karenia cells in the aerosol. Next one, please. And brevetoxin doesn't do that. Brevetoxin doesn't give you sore throat, sore eyes, or sore throat. Now, the nerves which are responsible for that sensation don't have the right sort of molecules on them for brevetoxin to interact with. And the epithelial cells don't have the right sort of molecules on them to be affected by brevetoxin. So something else is going on. Next one. There has to be something else. It's a potent irritant. Causes what makes things hurt, it's stinging. It's stable in the air, so it can be transported by aerosols, but it's also rapidly metabolised. Once it's on you, or in a fish, or something like that, it usually goes away. The actual toxin itself, the actual stuff itself goes away within a relatively short time, even though the effects may last longer. I've then finished. The next one. There's another factor we need to take into consideration too, and people have commented on the discoloured foam that builds up along the beach, especially after the westerly winds. The discoloured foam is full of decaying matter. It's full of bacteria. Next one. And it's almost certainly cytotoxic bacteria in the foam, and they can easily be transported by aerosols. There's a huge amount of work on the transport of bacteria by aerosols. So are they causing some of these symptoms? Possibly. We're not talking about infections, we're just talking about a straight out effect on the tissues. No one knows, but there's lots and lots of evidence that these sort of bacteria are found in aerosols associated with blooms. That's it, I think. Next one. So there's still much to learn. We can talk about any of this stuff in more detail later. If you want to know more, next one please. If you go to my website, there's lots of information there, and all the references and all of the data and stuff there. It's been getting like thousands of visits a day, which is a bit disconcerting. So that's it, I think. Thank you.
Thanks.